Great to see you again, Dan. Thanks so much for coming. And you definitely look very happy and enjoying the work that you're doing. Do you want to tell me a little bit about AngelRush Ventures?
Sure. So switch from being on the blockchain side of things and operating a company to being more on the investor side of things. So at AngelRush Ventures, what we try to do is we invest in, we build, and we acquire e-commerce technology companies. We've also dabbled a little bit into healthcare and FinTech, and that's what we're doing. For that, we have a couple companies in London, a couple in Canada, some here in San Francisco. It's been really fun and exciting. We're kind of shaking e-commerce on its head, and it's been really fun.
Oh, well, you'll have to come to more of our meetups and events because we're always focusing on all different aspects of FinTech.
Great.
So what could you give me your view on what's happening with the crypto exchanges? Because obviously they've been in the news lately and it has been quite hard to get any of the founders out to speak tonight. So I think that everyone here has actually got a good knowledge and overview of the domain, and I was wondering what your thoughts are on what's going on there.
Sure. So it's been really interesting to see the crypto landscape evolve, and especially part of that is how you get the money in and out, which is the exchange part of it. For me, being an operator, having a company, doing a big ICO, and then trying to get funds out or to other people and exchange it, it was very difficult. There were examples where exchanges would completely change their KYC policy and we'd be shut down overnight for a certain exchange. And what that leaves is people thinking, oh, did you take our money and run away with it? What happened? And then you have to explain to people using that exchange, oh, well, it's the exchange. They're going through a KYC revamp and other things. And you can see this happening in the news. Binance announced today that they're going through a KYC revamp. And I think the iffy thing that you see with exchanges is that they're still new and they're still evolving. There was a really interesting study that came out and it looked at the top 100 crypto exchanges in the world. And of that, there were 1% of them were vulnerable to attacks by bots. 60% of them didn't have HTTPS secure protocols, right? And so you think about that and it's like putting any bank information into a non-secure protocol, it's a little iffy. And then 40% of those were vulnerable to attacks where you basically put it's called clickjacking, but you put a web page in front of the page you're entering information in. So let's say I was entering my bank details, it could be a portal for that hacker right back into. So it looks like you're typing on your banking website, but it goes to their database. And I think it was 25.
That on ATMs too.
Oh yeah, yep. And then 25% were vulnerable to denial of service attacks. So if you think about that, and this is just the top 100, so that's probably the best of the best.
Yeah.
I think in the study, all of those had to have a volume over 100,000, a lot of users. So, I mean, these are bigger exchanges, and these are pretty significant problems. I think in that study, only 16% were in what they categorized as like A rating. So if you think about that from like just a grade on the health of an exchange, it's still pretty new and pretty scary. I mean, if you told me that only 16% of ATMs on the street had a A+ rating or an A rating, I'd be pretty worried. I don't know if I'd be using an ATM.
Yeah. And so, is there any sort of regulation? For crypto, and I guess they're all over the world, right? So some countries wouldn't have any regulation. Is that why they're so iffy?
It's yes and no. So you can see like Binance is a good example. They've moved all over the board, and I think one of their headquarters now is in Malta. So it's an island out there that everybody kind of seeks when you're trying to avoid regulation for the most part. And it's a little bit iffy. I don't know if you would do business with Bank of America if you asked where the headquarters were and they told you it was on some dodgy island. It's not saying Malta's the worst, but for the average consumer, they hear something like that, they probably can't even point to Malta on a map. So I've had business experiences with those Channel Islands before, and for the most part, they're trying to think about how to do things well. But for a general consumer, when you start hearing names like Malta, Alderney, Guernsey, Jersey, it just kind of throws you off.
Puerto Rico.
Yeah, still, it's just too new.
Yeah. So, where do you think things are going? What do you think's got to happen for this area of the domain to get a little bit more trust and safety.
Yeah. So going back to that original example I used where an exchange just shut down overnight because of the KYC policies, I mean, you need trust and reliability and access, right? And so if you're not getting the access that you need, meaning you go to bed, your funds are there, you wake up, your funds are there, kind of thing, I don't think people will use it, at least general consumers. And then KYC, knowing that as an exchange, you're taking in good money and good money is on the system and being sent out. And right now, it's kind of a regulate yourself type thing. And so I think regulatory bodies need to step in more. And once that happens, I think the exchanges themselves will feel more comfortable and the consumers will feel more comfortable as well. I mean, ask yourself if you would be dealing with a equities exchange like NASDAQ or Dow or something like that if it weren't regulated, and at any point in time it could shut out any type of company for a KYC process. At least like with that, there's a reason for the delisting, or a kind of a period of, oh, we're going to delist this company in a certain amount of time. There's a lot of, you can actually call up a line and say, hey, SEC, why was XYZ company delisted? So there's just not things like that. You can try to call the exchange hotline and say, hey, why are you down? Or why was this company delisted? But a lot of the times they give you a very generic answer, or they don't even pick up the phone.
And does the SEC regulate exchanges in the US? Because I haven't really heard anything about that, although I've heard tons about the STOs.
Yeah, so I'm at this point, I don't believe they do. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But I know that exchanges have been trying to bend to their will. I'm not sure if it's happened yet or not. But I know companies like Bittrex and Coinbase and others have really tried to be proactive on it, and they're usually in the startup world, we kind of always say, do something and then ask for forgiveness later, yes. Right? And that can't be had in the exchange world. They're definitely trying to figure out what the rules are, talking with regulators, talking with their lawyers on a daily basis, and then trying to kind of mold to those guidelines. And I mean, I know that's what we did as a FinTech blockchain company. We did the same thing. We were always talking to our lawyers, always talking to the regulators. We didn't want to break any rules, because this is the kind of industry where you break something and it's financial regulatory.
Yes.
You can go to jail.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty scary stuff, really. Did you get your money back from that ICO?
Yeah, once we went through a KYC process, and we did. But I have many friends and horror stories that I know of where people haven't. There's an example. I won't say the name of the company or the exchange, but I know one where this company failed to do a KYC process. Just like what Binance is kind of doing with the KYC revamp, this exchange decided overnight to kind of go from, I would say, like minimum tier KYC level to another higher level. And so that required additional documents and documentation. And so overnight, these companies learned that if they didn't have this documentation, they weren't trading the next day. And so then you go to the Telegram chats for all these companies, and it's like, hey, why is there no volume on this exchange? You go to CoinMarketCap and all these other places, and it shows a big goose egg for the amount going through the system. And it looks like, either they closed down the company and ran, or got delisted or something, right? And so you panic as an investor. And I know that company I'm thinking of, and many others, still, for some reason, didn't complete the KYC process. All it takes is not having one owner that can't get you the right documentation, like a driver's license with a selfie or whatever it is, and then you don't get upgraded to that next tier of KYC, and you're done. They're not going to release you. There's no reason that they need to
give you the money back.
Yeah, and so then as an investor, you're relying on a company to complete a KYC process. It has nothing to do with you. So that's what's really tricky, is there's no punishment or regulatory body looking at these companies that are in the crypto space saying, hey, company XYZ, update your KYC process because 100,000 customers are waiting to be liquid again in this exchange. And most of them only have one or two exchanges. It's pretty rare that you find a company that has a plethora of exchanges. Yeah. So it's crazy.
It's sort of a really unusual situation too, because in the startup world, no other domain has had these issues as far as regulation goes. And really for years, since 2008, that's been such an outlier community. And now, all of a sudden, since 2017, it's sort of hit the mainstream. So it's going to be interesting, I guess, to see how it all emerges and settles and, becomes part of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I see it kind of going as like not a winner take all, but definitely more companies filtering to the top, right? Because there's two ways to approach it. Almost no KYC and just try to grow big fast. And that's kind of what Binance did. I mean, they have almost the lowest level of KYC out there. And then you talk about companies like Coinbase and some of those type of companies that have been very strict on guidelines for KYC. And they get kind of only very high top level coins. So that, they only have your Bitcoin, your Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, that kind of currencies. They don't have a long listing like a Binance does. So it's either you're going to be very secure but have not a lot of currencies you're trading, or you're going to be very low on the KYC level, but you're going to have a plethora of all these different currencies you can trade. But you may run into bad situations from time to time. But that's the trade-off of, the freedom of a lot of currencies or the stringent of a tightly regulated company.
Well, we've certainly had a lot of bad stories lately, and unfortunately, it's obviously turned people off. But hopefully, everything will settle and it'll start to emerge as a much more reliable source of trading.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Dan.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to talk to you, and congratulations on the new position.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.